Well, hello, folks. I have to say, after doing this for 2.5 years, and this is my sixth Ask Me Anything, I'm always amazed that any of you are there just to see me. I completely understand why you're there to see my incredible guests, but I really don't know why you're there to just see me waffling on. But anyway, here I am. As you probably know, I'm taking a break for a few days going off to Germany, and then I start off live streaming again with the Sino-Japanese War, 2 weeks of shows. Still working on some of the content for that. If you are new to the channel, this is an opportunity to just ask me stuff, really. Ask me about living in Normandy, ask me about book recommendations, ask me about the WW2 TV project, ask me what kind of beer I like, and boxers, by the way, the pre-question there, I'm a boxers man. Just get that one out the way. So, yeah, good evening, everybody. Good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. So, just to tell you what I've been doing today, I had a great day. There are various tour groups in town from the World War II Museum in New Orleans, each with a historian, each of whom are friends of mine. So I had an evening with Mike Nyberg, who wrote the fantastic book about Vichy France, and the other one about the liberation of Paris, which is just an insanely good book. And I've got a pile of books beside me to show you. I didn't go and get that one, but Michael Nyberg is an astonishing writer, very Francophile, teaches in the USA, but writes about the French experience. And I had a chat with him, drinks with him. That was good. And then today I had lunch with John McManus and his wife Nancy. As you know, John has done, I don't know, 5 or 6, 7 shows or something with me. And I saw him in July at the We Have Ways Fest, which was great to catch up and see him again today. So that's twice in 1 year, which is finally meaning that kind of awful 2 years with COVID and not seeing anybody feels in the past now. And apologies to anybody who is still suffering from COVID, but it does feel like we've moved on a bit. And then after lunch with John McManus, I met Craig Simons, who is the naval historian, who did a show with me, more than that. It was a day of the Navy Army game in the States, and he did a show about the Battle of Coral Sea. So it was nice to just see people and chat person to person as opposed to through the medium of this screen. But yeah, but anyway, I will address some of your questions. Before I do that, the topic that everybody's talking about in the UK is the BBC series Rogue Heroes, SAS Rogue Heroes. And there's been a chat in the sidebar about the new version of All Quiet on the Western Front, which I could talk about, although it is First World War, but I haven't seen the new version yet. I don't know when I'll do it, so I can't comment on it because I haven't seen it. But SAS Rogue Heroes is based on the accounts of the SAS in North Africa. It's primarily based on Ben McIntyre's book, who I thought did a fantastic job with his book Double Agent and the one about Operation Mincemeat. I have to say, I don't think his SAS book was as good as others I've read. Just a bit pedestrian for me, but I can see because he's very high profile while the BBC went with him. But Damien Lewis, and if you didn't catch the show with Damien Lewis a couple of nights ago, it was really good. He wrote, and it's just out now, Brothers in Arms, which covers the foundation of the SAS, the formation of it, I should say. And it was just completely coincidental that it happened to come out. It's available for purchase, a couple of weeks ago, coinciding with the release of this TV show. It was just how it worked out. But I've noticed an upturn in the number of people going back and looking at some of the SAS shows I've done in the past. So that's interesting that it's showing people the exploits of that unit, and people will go from the TV show to real books. But to just talk about the TV show before I start asking you questions, I really enjoyed it. As with any military history show, you have to just, don't look at the details that are wrong. Some wrong vehicles, some of the ties aren't very much, the hats weren't worn all that well, and a bit too much swearing possibly for 1944. I love the music choices, all sort of heavy metal, punk stuff from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, really good. I really enjoyed it. But I'm not going to do any spoilers because if you're in the USA or Australia or New Zealand, you haven't had it yet. I believe it's coming to the USA, and I forget which channel it's on November the 23rd or something. So you will get a chance to see it. But I really enjoyed it, despite the fact it's not perfect, because in 6 episodes of lots of action, you can't get into the detail of really complicated, nuanced people like Paddy Mayne and David Sterling and Bill Fraser and some of these other people who were very, very complicated people. I think Damien on his show did a really good job of unraveling their rather complicated personalities. And in a TV show that's meant to be bringing in, it's the Peaky Blinders creation team have put it together. They want that audience, I guess. So it's worked very well. I really enjoyed it. I smiled all the way through it. I mean, to me, as a massive fan of punk music, and the Damned are my favorite punk band, not Sex Pistols, not the Clash. I like both of those, but the Damned for me, watching an attack on the airfield, and I think you all know, if you know anything about the SAS, there are lots of attacks on airfields. Accompanied to the Damned song Smash It Up was just one of the best 2 or 3 minutes of television I've seen this year. I love the music, love the action, but I accept the fact that the characters are drawn a bit thinly. I accept the fact that they're condensing some of the action. They're simplifying it a bit. The female spy, I thought, was a bit of an unnecessary addition to the cast. She's a fictional character, but yeah, hey, I really enjoyed it. So if you haven't, then go and see it. Yeah, New Rose is in it as well, Ian Carr. He went from New Rose to Smash It Up, and there was some great stuff there. Some Johnny Thunders, there was some Clash, there was some AC/DC, some Motorhead, some really good soundtrack. If you haven't seen the TV show yet, you can at least go on and find the Spotify playlist or other music sources are available and have a look at that. I thought it was really good. But punk music is my big thing, and I love punk music, and I thought it was great. So it's like Band of Brothers. It's going to be like the the Masters of the Air series that comes out next year. TV shows, films are always going to try and balance between entertainment and telling history. And the purists will always, we're talking about the SAS show, Rogue Heroes, that's on BBC. Just got the question there coming in. TV shows are always going to struggle to balance historical accuracy with entertainment. And essentially, they're not made for people like me and some of you people watching. They're not made for people who devour military histories and proper books and things like that. They're made for a mass audience who will watch sport on a Wednesday night, a film on a Thursday night, and a TV show on a Friday night. It's aimed at those people. But as with things like Band of Brothers, as with other TV shows and movies, Dunkirk, which wasn't the perfect movie by any means, people started to watch documentaries and start reading books, and that is the important thing. And so some people will just see it as a TV show and go, yeah, that was all right, action, and they'll move on to the next one. But others will be gripped. Others will be looking for further information. And Damien Lewis said he's had lots of emails since the TV show came out saying, tell me about this, tell me about that. And that's good. So SAS Rogue Heroes, I think it's part 3 or maybe part 4 is coming up this weekend. Is it Saturday night, Sunday night? I binge watch it on BBC iPlayer, so I've watched all 6. But I thought it was really, really good. And I'm not a big AC/DC fan. You're talking about the fact I wear a hat. I'm much more punk than heavy metal. I like some of the rock stuff in between. If you want to start talking about music, my absolute favorite punk band is the Damned. I also like kind of Americana music, so I love the Band, Creedence Clearwater Revival, that kind of stuff as well. And of course, my big first love is rockabilly and early rock and roll. So anything from Buddy Holly, Gene Vincent, right up to the Stray Cats and the kind of the 80s rockabilly revival stuff. So that's really cool. I like that as well. But yeah, New Rose is the thing. So yeah, that's the SAS Rogue Heroes out of the way. So again, I want to thoroughly endorse, if you haven't got it yet, Damien Lewis's new book, Brothers in Arms. Damien is just a really, really good writer. He makes you want to turn the page. And some of the military histories, James Holland said it on his podcast the other day with Al Murray. He said that, some of them, a lot of them are bad. A lot of them are not read well. And I think that's one of the things with military history books, is that a lot of them are just very full of information, full of detail, and they don't make you want to turn the page. But for me, the authors who are maybe described as popular authors make you want to read on. And that is the point. Make you want to. So the photo behind me is of Omaha Beach. I just use it because I like the angle of the kind of the landing craft there. Kind of brings your eyes in towards the center of the screen, which is really good. So let's do some questions, and I'll talk about some more books again later on. So I'm just going to go through them in random order. What really did happen to Glenn Miller? Well, there's a really good by Dennis. I'm forgetting his name now. I've had so many guests over the years. Dennis something or other Sprague, I think it is. He did a show. Go back through the World War II TV or search for it. We did a show about the disappearance of Glenn Miller, but he is a historian from the Glenn Miller archive, and he is also ex-Air Force or something, and he did just an incredible book where he went through all the reports, all the meteorological reports, the flight logs, and pieced together exactly what happened to Glenn Miller. And there's no point in me trying to redo it now. Just go and look at the show or get his book. Like this, the Glenn Miller, the case concluded, or the new something like that. It's a book about 10 years ago. It's really good. Glenn Miller died because of an accident. Bad luck. And yeah, you can go and find that one there. So let's go back and look at some questions, and I'll talk about books again. So I remember one of the early ones, so many people watching now. I really can't believe that you guys are wanting to watch me. So am I feeling better about last week about the negativity? That was Dave asked that. Yeah, I had a flurry of people just criticizing on the comments after shows. And it just got me down a bit. I shouldn't do, because lots more people say nice things than say bad things, but the bad things just niggle away at me. And most of my historian friends are in some ways dealing with imposter syndrome. They think that they, why am I worthy of doing this? And when people, tell you don't know this and you don't know that, and it's when they say things like this guy, meaning the historian, that they don't write the person's guess. What does this person know? And this person hasn't done their research. Someone said that about John Parshall the other day. He hasn't done his research. I mean, literally a guy who spent 12 years working on his 1942 book. He may not have concluded the same things you have concluded, if you are one of those people who leaves negative comments, but he definitely has done his research. It's just that his findings are different to yours, because history is all about opinions. There are facts, there are certain things. An aircraft has a certain range, a tank fires a certain size shell, a country began its invasion on a certain date. But beyond that, who's better, Patton or Bradley? Who is Rommel good at this? Is Rommel bad at that? Historians have a swathe of different opinions about that. They change their ideas as they do more research, and it is all about reanalyzing the same subjects, and people will come up with different conclusions. So yeah, I am feeling much better. It's been a really positive week there. And I just sent a message to Brad, because Brad On This Day in Canadian Military History is doing a live stream at the same time, and I really didn't realize when I set this up that he was doing one. I should have checked, but it's my only free night before I go off for a few days. So I sent an apology to Brad there. There was another question, I've just got to find it now, about where am I going when we go to Germany. So Philip Blood is watching, who is doing some of the hosting and guiding and leading us around, because Phil lives out there in Aachen. So we go to Aachen. We're stopping in Liège. We're going to go and see Fort Eben Emael, which amazingly I've never actually been to see. We will we will do a day trip to Remagen and see what remains of the bridge and the museum there, and weather permitting, a day or a day and a half or something in the Hurtgen Forest, because I've got a Hurtgen Forest week coming up on World War II TV in December. So I have never been to the Hurtgen Forest, or if I have, I think I may have been through it but doing something else and didn't stop, or been past it. So as with everything else, it's not a long enough trip to do properly what I want to do. I'm doing it kind of I'm going to say the American way, but the package way of on. I would love to spend a week just in the Hurtgen Forest, but I've got things to do. And anyway, but it'll be a great time. I can't wait to go and see it and meet Phil in person, another historian who's been a guest, who I am looking forward to meeting in person. And Alan Allport, who's been on the show a few times, is coming to Bayer in a couple of weeks, and I will get to meet him in person as well, which is really cool. So I'm waffling, but I'll go through some of the questions there and have a look. Favorite American battleship? I'm not a big naval history guy, and when I do read about naval history, it's much more about the characters, the leaders, and it's about kind of the combined arms aspect. So when I read about the Navy, I like to read about the air, the sea, the ground, and read, well, as it's come up. I like reading books like this, Island Infernos by John McManus, who I had lunch with today. and this is the second of his trilogy about the Pacific War. So he talks about the Navy, but in conjunction with the Army and the Marines and the Army Air Corps, and he'll talk about the kind of campaign. So I don't have favorite ships. I don't really have. The technical side of the Navy seems to me a very specialist interest. There's the amazing channel, Alexander Clark has his channel. There's Draken EFL has his channel about naval history, and they will go literally into the nuts and bolts of armor plating. Jamie from Armored Carriers, his website and YouTube channel. It's not. They do it really well. They have phenomenal numbers of people watching what they talk about, but I'm not really into the naval hardware in that sense. And my cousin of mine was on HMS Belfast in the 1960s, possibly 1950s, but I don't have any favorite ships of any type, really. So that When France Fell is the book by Michael Nyberg, Andreas, really good, and about Vichy France. That's really, and Roman's here. Good evening, Roman. That's nice. So and Craig Simons is a really nice guy. He'd done one show with me, and we didn't have time to have chat afterwards. Often, so behind the scenes stuff. When I finish a live stream, either before we go live, we chat for 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. Or afterwards, we chat for 10 minutes, quarter of an hour. We just, talk about how the show went and things we're working on. And the day I had Craig on talking about the Battle of the Coral Sea, he had to immediately nip off because it was the Navy Army football game and he had to go to that. So I didn't have a chance to do a debrief. And he was very slick and very professional on the show, but I didn't kind of have a chance to get to know him. And I spent some time with him today and got to know him, and he signed a couple of books for me. And talking of his books, there's two really good books on the Battle of Midway. One is Shattered Sword by John Parshall and Anthony Tully, and John Parshall was on twice in the Alamein series. The other book on Midway is Craig's book, The Battle of Midway. This, again, going back to the battleship question, of course it talks about which ship is doing what and which carrier is doing this and which carrier, but it's more about the leadership. It's more about the decisions. It doesn't really bother me whether it's which length the aircraft carrier is, or whether the battleship's got 15-inch guns or 16-inch guns. That kind of detail doesn't really, I was going to say float my boat. That's a weird thing to say when talking about ships, isn't it? But there you go. And I'm not drinking alcohol tonight, so any mistakes I made are going to be entirely sober mistakes. I'll go back to some more questions. Dean Murphy, when will we see Jason D. Mark? So he'll be on in the 2 weeks in the new year that I'm kind of talking about, calling it Stalingrad 2 weeks, because Stalingrad is a good way of bringing people in. But actually, we're covering the winter of 42-43. So there'll be guests on talking about other areas of the Eastern Front from sort of autumn 42 right up to kind of the spring of 1943. So Jason D. Mark is going to be on. Prit Buttar will be back on. David Starr will be on. Ian McGregor will be on. And while we're doing books, one of the books I read over the summer was The Lighthouse of Stalingrad by Ian McGregor, who will be on talking about that. And Ian is a British historian, and it can serve as an overview about the Stalingrad battle, but it particularly focuses on the mythology of the Pavlov's house story and how that became a big thing. So it looks at kind of the historiography of the Stalingrad campaign. And it's one of those, I think I did it in 2 or 3 nights. It went really, really well. And that's good. Where in France do buy my books on Amazon? Leslie is asking. Well, I use the Amazon service, but I try and buy them from independent booksellers. There's one worldbooks.fr or something. I can get English language books from a warehouse in Paris that come through the Amazon system, but it's via an independent bookshop. So that's quite good. Let's go back and have a look at some other questions again. And I apologize for kind of going back and forth through things randomly, but that is the nature of the beast. The Dermot Square. Do you know of any evidence of any conflict between artillery, colossal cracks doctrine, infantry battle drill, infiltration in British Army and Normandy? It's a big question, and it's not something I'm particularly knowledgeable about. Dermot will be coming on in the new year talking about. I've just forgotten what it is Demet's coming to talk about now. I'm having that kind of day. He'll remind me what it is he's talking about. Yeah, it's completely sailed out of my head. It's there are definitely cracks in everything to do with Normandy in terms of doctrine and combined arms. Everything when John Buckley has been on talking about armor, and we've talked about artillery. Everything has not been fully perfected yet. Normandy is still another step in the learning curve. But that's not a question I particularly know. Let me go back and have a look at some other questions there. Am I married? I can refer to Mag as my wife, but we're not actually married. We're 8 years into being together, both second relationship for both of us. So I have stepkids, but we're not married. So we're that modern. I'm 53 years old, but I'm modern in the sense we're not actually married. But yeah, I kind of have a wife, and I often refer to her as my wife, but we're not actually married. We may or may not do it at some point. Well, that's a good question. Let's say you were 25 when World War II broke out. What would you have wanted to do versus what you think you ended up doing? I probably would have ended up in the infantry because I'm working class from Essex. And I don't think I didn't, if it's the same me now without qualifications, I'd have ended up in the poor bloody infantry. I used to do, because I used to do a bit of a graphic design, and I learnt bookbinding when I was in my 20s. I did a lot of work with printing and letterpress and calligraphy and things like that, and creating letterheads, before desktop publishing. Basically, I learned to typeset before desktop publishing came in. So I kind of think if I had been in a prisoner of war camp, I would have been doing the kind of work Donald Pleasance did in The Great Escape, the forging, Blythe. I kind of felt that would be something I'd like to do. In fact, one of my dream jobs would be I saw a YouTube channel. There's a guy who creates all those things, like Professor Jones's diary in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade. Someone has to create that prop. Someone for a movie has to create sort of documents. So when in that recent Operation Mincemeat film, someone's handing over top secret documents, someone has to make that. Someone has to make it with the right kind of paper and the type, and use a typewriter and type out and think. I kind of like to, that'd be a dream job for me, creating documentation for TV shows, World War II stuff. So if I've been in the military and I could choose what I do, that's what I think would have been my forte, doing kind of forging work, working with creation of fake documents, something like that. So working with what's his name, Airy Neve or something in London, helping send secret documents to prisons in Colditz, something like that is what I think I would have done, or like to have done. No, Andrews, I've never been to Ebn Emal. Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, there's lots of places not very far from where I live that I've never been to. Yeah, so yeah, we're going there soon. Have I done a show all about Ho Chi Minh, aiding and not particularly. We are doing a show in the Sino-Japanese week about the downed flying tigers. Daniel Jackson, historian, is coming on to talk about that. So we will be addressing what was going on in China, not so much Indochina, but it raises a good question, Richard, about the fact that I still want this channel to broaden out and tackle more than just Normandy and Arnhem and things like that. And we had the guy the other day who said we weren't talking enough about the Eastern Front during El Alamein 2 weeks. And one of the things is that when I started this randomly to do something when COVID was happening, obviously I started with Normandy because A, I live in Normandy, and B, the friends I know who are historians are mostly Normandy historians. So that's where I started with. So even if I do 2 or 3 more years of the kind of programming I'm doing now, that first week where I did a lot of first year where I did a lot of Normandy content will still mean that if you look at my channel and the 640 or shows I've done, there's a lot of Normandy content. But this year, 2022, I've done very little on Normandy. I've done way more Eastern Front, way more Pacific than Normandy. But yeah, I started with what I knew because it made sense. But in the future, I really want to tackle more of Southeast Asia and what was happening. We've got a show in the Sino-Japanese week about the Chinese and Japan and fighting over Taiwan and how Taiwan played into things. We did a show about Thailand 6 months ago. So I want to do more of that stuff where we're bringing historians in from around the world to give their perspectives. If you didn't catch the show South Africa versus Rommel last week with David Katz, that was a really good one, because as a South African trained military historian, he saw the North Africa campaign through a completely different set of eyes to someone like myself, and it was just fascinating. And talking about the Boer tactics and commando attack, that was really good. So yeah, I want to branch out into theaters that most of us don't do. Yeah. But Gary is asking, Normandy was another step in the development of the British Army. What are some other steps they'd taken beforehand, and name some early engagements in Normandy where they showed them? Oh, well, I mean, I suppose we've been talking a lot about commandos and SAS and things recently. I mean, one of the things about Normandy, with look at the British and Commonwealth invasion beaches, was the landing of commandos on the flanks to link the beaches. So you have 46, 47, 48 Royal Marine Commando doing a slightly different job, number 4, number 3, and 6 Army Commandos up on Sword Beach. But that was something born out of the fact, if you saw the Damien Lewis show, we knew nothing about what to do with special forces back in 42. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's why David Sterling of the SAS kind of started doing stuff he wanted to do. Like that old adage, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness once you've done it. And that's kind of what David Sterling did with the SAS. He just kind of started raiding airfields and then told military's high command after he'd done it. And I think by Normandy, at least we know what to do with commandos. So that's something the British Army has got much better at, of what they're good at and how they can be a swift force to do linking and kind of advanced contact reconnaissance, I suppose. What else had the British done that was, well, I mean, I guess technology. I mean, the funnies, things like that. That's more about equipment than doctrine. But yeah, there are lots of things where combined arms is getting much better. But I think when you look at the Normandy campaign, obviously a lot of the units that came through Normandy, they've been training in England for a year or 2 years. American 29th Division, I mean, 2 years waiting for a fight. The Canadian 3rd Division and so on. So no matter how much they did in training, when you meet the enemy, as they did in Normandy, and an enemy that didn't want to give up the territory, and then when the decent units come, and the SS units and Das Reich and Panzer Lehr and 9th and 10th SS, of course, a lot of the training they had been doing over the last 2 years had to be redone, because the enemy fought differently to perhaps how they expected to. So yeah, so that's a good question, Stuart. Hello, Stu. Hello. I've still got a little bit of Doom Bar left from your beer. You think I'd have drunk all that beer you bought me in June, but I still have some, because I know I can't get any more once it's gone. So I still have a bit of Doom Bar, but and 2 cans of Ghost Ship, and I think 2 cans of Doom Bar left. So I will have to get more stock soon. But still, yeah, love to do more Normandy live streams. But of course, that first year, going back to the first year of World War II TV, the reason Mag and Duncan, when he was available, and Colin were able to go and do filming for me, is they weren't working as tour guides. Now, Colin and Mag are working insanely hard. Duncan is no longer in Normandy, so we don't see him anymore. So when Mag is working 4 or 5 days, 6 days a week sometimes, the last thing I want to do is send her out in the evening with her phone to film on a battlefield. So, yeah, that was a product of then. And I will do some more stuff with Mag, but it's just things have changed. Any idea which units embarked from New Haven? Not off the top of my head, but I can tell you that the archaeologist stroke military historian Stephen Fisher is working on what will be, especially from the British and Commonwealth point of view, but he's covering American forces, probably the definitive embarkation naval loading tables book. It'll be lots and lots of data, lots of graphs, lots of charts, lots of information. But Stephen's a really great guy. And I got to meet him in person in July, having done a few shows. So when his book comes out on the naval, the amassing of the fleet, it will answer in great detail that question about who left from where and which ships left and which forces. So Stephen Fisher's book will be one of those must-buy books when I'm not sure when it comes out. I'll go back, try and get, I have a tendency of looking at the recent question. I'm going to scroll back up through the list and look at the early ones. And if I don't answer all your questions, I apologize. would be really interesting in episodes for Allied occupied countries during World War II. Yeah, Faroes and Iceland. Again, that's the question. It's all about if presenters can be found. I get really good comments with people saying you should do a show on this, you should do a show on that, and then I look to see what books have been written about that subject. And sometimes the only book was written 40 years ago, and the author died 20 years ago. So it's I as you know, I don't ever present the information myself. Well, a little bit about Normandy. I find an expert. I think that is what World War II TV's strength is that there's no possible way someone like myself or someone else who runs a YouTube channel can know everything. So you bring the person on who knows the subject, and then I feed off what they say, and I can put my questions in and ask questions on behalf of you guys. But yeah, it's all about finding the expert. But right now, I don't need any new guests in a sense that I've got the next 3, 4, maybe 5 months more or less worked out on paper stroke in my head. So what's the struggle now is when a new historian contacts me or I find a new thing is trying to fit that person's subject into an existing theme week, or when can I do it with their commitments and their book launch or what they're doing, or if they teach around their teaching. But it's getting increasingly difficult to kind of tally everything up and get the dates work out. But yeah, it's all about finding the experts generally. Good that you're reading Prit Boutar's Meat Grinder. It's a really good book, isn't it? And Prit is a really, really good historian. And he writes in that way that, as I said earlier, you want to find out what's happening next. So he reads really well. Michael Ackerman. Hi, Mike. I did show you some you sent you some photos of Omaha Beach. And yes, I'd love you to come back on and do another show about the defenses on Omaha. We talked about you at lunch today. John McManus was asking about photo analyzing and who is doing the work, understanding aerial photos and Google Earth. And I said Michael Ackerman is doing it, and he was amazed that you've never been to Normandy. He's like, he's never been there. And he said no, he just works from photos. And if you don't know who Michael is, he did a show with us about the Vieille-Sur-Mer defenses at Omaha Beach, where it's the time. He's spent the time looking at photos, period photos, aerial photos, Google Earth, and working out what was that, how did that link to there. Here's a photo of it in 42, here's a photo of it in 44, and doing some incredible work. I've lived near Omaha Beach for 2 decades, and Michael over there in the States is pointing out things about it just by doing this work of looking at photos and comparing it. And hey, I don't have much time to do that kind of work. There's a question there about aircraft. I'm not I like ships. I'm not a tech head. I can recognize aircraft types, but I'm not the kind of person that can talk about the climb rates of different aircraft and say the Model C, the Model D. That's not my thing. So I couldn't know. Woody, could you do an episode on Japan's infamous Unit 731? Now that rings a bell, but I don't know what that is. So yeah, I maybe I could. Will I have Ian Gardner on to talk about his? Hang on, is that Ian? Yeah, yes, Ian Garner. I think you mean Ian Garner, don't you? Ian Gardner's the 3rd Battalion 506 guy. It's Ian Garner you mean, isn't it? Yeah, Ian Garner's been on talking about Stalingrad in popular memory. It'd be good to have Ian Garner on again, and it'd be good to have Ian Gardner on talking about 3rd Battalion 506. Both of them. That would be good. Hi, Neil. And what about a series of chats discussing the uniforms and equipment of each nation? There, that would be good. That's another really good idea. It's actually on my list to break down. I thought a week where we tackle, like Monday British, Tuesday American, Wednesday Canadian, Thursday Italian, Friday whatever, and we go through. One week we do infantry gear, next week we do a run through of tanks, next week we do weaponry or something. But then I realized again, to do it properly, it would take ages. And I wonder, although some people would really like that, some of the people who watch the channel wouldn't like that. And that's, as I'm getting kind of more popular, I mean, I'm still a small fish in YouTube. It's trying to appeal to the kind of broad viewers who watch what we're doing. And sometimes some people don't want to talk about aircraft types all day or uniformly. So yeah, I will do that. Have I read Panzer Commander by Hans von Luck? Yes, I corresponded with Hans von Luck years ago, and then when he passed away, I carried on writing to his widow for a couple of years. I've got a signed photo of Hans von Luck in the copy of my book. The problem with Hans von Luck is a lot of what he writes isn't quite what happened. A lot of what he writes is what happened, but a lot of what he writes is exaggerated, because Hans von Luck became one of those German officers. Phil Blood probably encountered him, if Phil's still watching, who was doing all the kind of army staff rides back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So he would be on those trips to Normandy. People like Major Howard and Radley Walters, the Canadian general. And it became a bit where these former senior officers were kind of outdoing each other and trying to improve their stories. So one year, the guest would say, we encountered 10 tanks over there. The next year, it'll be 20 tanks over there. The next year, it'll be 40 tanks over there, and so on and so forth. And Hans von Luck got a bit carried away. The big story that's the bone of contention is the 88s at Operation Goodwood that he personally ordered to fire. There's a lot of doubts about that happening the way he said it is. So, as with essentially any account written by a German in the period 30, 40 years after the war, you have to use your common sense to separate the wheat from the chaff and understand what is genuine and what is them trying to move themselves away from war crime, and disassociate themselves from the SS, things like that. So German memoirs are really interesting, but they are minefields in some ways. Question about copyright infringements and things like that. Yes, I don't. That's why I don't use much footage on my shows. I just have presenters coming on talking their stuff, and mostly public domain images and the maps they write from their books. And one of the things that's good about what I do is if I have an author on who's published a book and has paid for the license to have the photos in his book and the maps in his book, because the show with me is promoting the book, it counts as publicized. It counts under the license. It's advertising the book. They're allowed to use the contents of their book for promotional purposes. So that's one of the kind of benefit loopholes I kind of am able to use. But yeah, they're still using footage is the big thing. Pathé, for example, people like me can't use Pathé. All highly regulated. So the footage people like myself and Brad use, if we do use any footage, is all that public domain stuff at National Archives in the States that is anyone can use in any kind of thing. But that's why I don't use the footage really, because lots of stuff out there you just can't afford to use it. That's why TV shows, proper TV, uses the same footage again and again and again, because they use the footage they own, because it's horrendously expensive per second to use some of this footage. So yeah, that's why I don't use it. Just have experts talking is the way to go. Yeah, keep going with some questions. That's a good point, Robert, about during the pandemic is how everybody was available. That's when in the early days of World War II TV, no one was ever busy. I mean, everyone was just sitting around in their houses, desperate for anything to do. So it was so easy to get, Alex Kershaw and John McManus, all these, because they weren't working. Now everybody's back in work. They're teaching, they're writing, they're traveling, and I still am able to get guests, but it's all about fitting in with schedules and things, which is yeah, a bit more complicated. Any chance of bringing Philip Brazier back? Yes, Philip will be back at some point. Yeah, he's embracing talking online. He's done a thing on this day in Canadian military history, and Philip's doing lots of work. Yeah, he's working on another show for me next year, but I forgot what that one is as well. My brain is not what it should be. Yeah, no ships, no planes, just get Woody stuff in his favorite Monty. Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Leslie, because I'm burdened with the fact that I don't like Montgomery as a human being. He's just a bit of a dick. I've said it many times. He's more than a bit of a dick. He's a prize-winning, Olympic gold medal winning dickhead. I mean, he's not good at dealing with people. Great if he happens to like you. If you're one of his friends, it's great with him. If you're anybody else, he's really difficult. But I've come to believe there's no one else who did what he did or could do what he did as well. Just because he's prickly doesn't mean he isn't good at what he does. And when anyone says to me, well, it shouldn't have been Montgomery in charge, I say, well, who would you have in charge instead? People often say General Slim from his success out in the Far East, but taking Slim away from the Far East is depriving the Far East of their best commander, but I don't know that Slim's ability to master what he was doing in the Pacific or the Far East would translate to Europe. Slim was a master. He spoke 2 or 3 Indian languages. He spoke, what it was, Japanese, what it was, how many languages he spoke. He was traveled through that region. That's why General Slim did well out there, because he understood it. Taking them and expecting to do the same thing he did with the 14th Army, with 21st Army Group in Normandy, I don't think would work. Like I don't think Montgomery would work out in Burma. So I don't know who else, if not Montgomery, who else would do it. So yeah, that would be yeah. If I could interview Monty, what questions would you ask him? Well, the first thing would he even speak to me? I'm a working class lad. He'd probably patronize me in some way and pat me on the head and send me on my way. But I don't know. I think I just like to chat to him and just kind of get. You'd want to talk to someone like Patton or Montgomery or MacArthur and get beyond the bit where they put the act on for the press. You'd want to get to know them beyond that surface level of how they dealt with people, because there's the Montgomery who would go out and speak to the press, as there was the MacArthur, the Patton, the Bradley who would do all that. Then there's the person behind that, like all of us. And the trick, if you're going to speak to any of these people, would be to get the rapport with them so that you can sit with them and they start trusting you, and you can just have those off the cuff pub conversations where I think would learn a lot more. So yeah, no particular question with Montgomery, but just chat to him enough so that he would feel comfortable. That would be good. I am the best World War II YouTube. So thank you, Todd. That is good. I've said it before in these Ask Me Anything shows. The thing is, I'm doing everything that YouTube doesn't recommend. I'm doing shows for an hour and a half. Sometimes they're 2 hours. There's no editing. It's all live. So there are mistakes made. Things don't always work. Sometimes the internet drops, blah, blah, blah. But then the benefit of that is we have the interactivity. So even just doing something live is worse for the analytics than uploading a video. So if I was doing a chat with Damien Lewis and I recorded it, edited it and uploaded it, it would automatically do better in the YouTube algorithm as an upload than a live stream. I found that out in September talking to a very competent, well-renowned YouTuber from Poland. In fact, America lives in Poland. He said, yeah, live stuff never will get you higher. So I'm doing that. I'm doing live that isn't popular. I'm doing long that isn't popular. And it's just me and a historian talking. It's not dynamic. It's not full of explosions and computer graphics, things like that. So I'm doing everything that I shouldn't be doing. But the point is, there's you people watching who've built up this loyal following. So I don't think it'll ever be a massive channel, because I think what I'm doing is too, I don't want to say niche, because niche makes it sound like you're kind of arrogant. I think it's too specialized in what it does, and I don't want to change it. Time Ghost, I'm going to be in a lot of Time Ghost D-Day coverage next June, because I did filming with them for a week. The way they talk about the war is very much like a news report. That's, Indian Spartacus sit behind a desk in a studio and they almost do it like a news bulletin, and it's really good what they do, and they condense a battle to a 20-minute really tightly edited super video with great audio, great visuals, and it's really good what they're doing, but it's not what I'm going to be doing. So yeah. Yes, the World War II conference at New Orleans. Some of my friends are going, both to attend it and to speak at it. So that I wish I could. One day I'll get to New Orleans and see it there. I know somewhere else I haven't been. What would be, or what is the least topic you want to cover up and cover? Is that cover up or cover, and why not? One of the things I don't like doing and won't be doing is giving airtime to all the people who write all those books about Nazi insignia and things like that. There's a whole plethora of books about the Iron Crosses and the Knights Crosses and the different types of I mean, although the idea of doing a show about uniforms worn by the military would be interesting, it wouldn't be geeking out on all the different, wound badges the German army issue, because I think that gets a bit weird. So that's one of the things I definitely won't be doing on this channel. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the people who write those kind of books or the people who read those kind of books. It's just not what I want to do. It's going down a very, very specific kind of niche things. So anything that would seem to be celebrating the style of the SS, the Nazis, is something I'm absolutely going to keeping a mile from. Even doing a show where you kind of talk about German tanks can borderline start being a bit, the Wehrberuhs start coming out, the people that think Michael Wittmann was a legend. So that's one of the things I really avoid doing on this channel, is giving any airtime to the people that think the Third Reich was cool. And if you think I'm making it up, that there are people out there who think the Third Reich is cool, then you should see some of the comments that people like myself get on my channel, other people get there. These people, whenever anything comes up about SS war crimes, the what about? They go, what about crimes committed by the Allies? What about crimes committed by this? You go, well, that's like saying, we're trying to arrest this serial killer who's been raping and killing women in this part of England. Yeah, but what about this other serial killer who's also killing a bit? Yeah, but we're talking about this one right now. And that way of people trying to justify, if everybody's killing, it's okay. If they're more than, it's despicable. So that annoys me. Yeah, Imperial War Museum used to charge £750 per second for archive film for TV shows in the UK. There you are, from the man who knows, Paul Reed. So that's why people don't use that footage in shows. That's why shows documentaries aren't being made in those same quantities. That's why it's easier to get a presenter, like they do a Dam Busters show, for example. It's bizarrely, it's cheaper probably to hire the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, get Sir David Jason in a modern Lancaster and fly that all around and have him talking there. That's probably cheaper than actually using wartime footage. That's the ridiculous thing about how expensive it is to use wartime footage. Crazy. So so more questions. Can I do an episode on Hitler's Jewish doctor? If someone else came forward who knows about the subject and could present on the subject, that would be good. Yes. And in chance, Jenny Grant is going to be on sometime. Jennifer is finishing off her PhD and she's changed jobs from teaching. So she was going to be doing a show about a Polish general. Which one was she going to do it on? My brain is gone again, but she's not going to be doing that right now. But she's going to be coming back on and talking about Sosabowski, I think, post-war, but it's just basically got to wait till she's finished her current project and got her PhD. So she will be back, because Jenny's one of my favorites, and but not in the immediate future. What do I think about Eisenhower's broad front strategy versus a narrow front strategy? Well, I think the proof of the fact it worked. I mean, I know people say the Normandy campaign was slow, which it wasn't. It came out under expectations. Within 11 months of landing in Normandy, the war is over. I think I defy any other method that would have sped it up any more than that. I mean, why are we talking about something that worked? This is one of the things, like when we talk about Omaha Beach being a disaster. It wasn't. It was a successful landing that started badly. Now, I completely understand discussing things that didn't work. People write at great lengths about Pickett's charge at Gettysburg, or the Chindit columns that didn't always work, or they write about failings here. Market Garden, they write about why it didn't work. But when something did work, why discuss it? The broad front strategy worked. It defeated Hitler and crushed his armies within 11 months. So I think it worked. My other half, Mag, is asking one book to save in case of a fire at home. I don't know. I would save you first, then the cats, then I'd go back in for the books. Or the cats first, then you, then the books. No, I'm joking. You, then the cats, then the books. I don't know. That would be really, choosing a single book to save would be really difficult. I've got so many signed by veterans, signed by the authors, things like that. So yeah. So what more? Some more questions. Just filling in while I'm reading questions. Thank you for your hard work. I found you while seeing what YouTube videos there were on the Italians. Yeah, and I like talking about the Italians, and one of my really things I'm proud of is giving Julio a chance to and others. Damien has been on, others talking about the Italian army, because we're still burdened with this idea that, you know, we joke about British when they joke about World War II, they joke about the Americans being oversexed, overpaid over here. They joke about, you know, the French surrendering in 1940. They joke about the Italians being shit, and all these certain things, and these tired, old, pathetic jokes we make. We need to move on from them, you know. And so the Italians can speak to anybody who served in North Africa or Italy, and ask them what they thought of the Italian troops they were fighting. And huge respect for them as an enemy. They didn't have the best kit all the time. They didn't have the best leadership all the time. But the Italians did. They punched above their weight, I think, given, again, this lack of equipment. And I think the Italians punched above their weight really a lot in North Africa. So there you are. If I'm in infantry, what gun would you like to carry? Well, I don't really want to carry a gun at all. I mean, that's one of the weird things about the fact I talk about World War II all the time, is I'm a confirmed pacifist. I hate wars. Part of me kind of likes guns in the sense that I can kind of see in a museum, oh, that Bren gun is cool. But I as I've got older and older, I don't think guns are cool. But in a weird way, paradoxically, I do think they're cool. It's a weird contrast in my head. Bren gun is the best weapon of World War II, isn't it? So there we are. That's it. On my tours, which parts of the Normandy story give you the most pleasure to share? Well, I very rarely do anything about the D-Day beaches now. I've done that for 20 years. Don't do it anymore. When I do touring now, it's inland. Always talking about this. So what gives me pleasure is taking people to places where you cannot see the beaches. Talking about the July and August battles. And that doesn't mean that I mean, anyway, knocking the people who make their living taking people to the D-Day beaches. Mag spends her life, professional life, taking people to the D-Day beaches. It's a pilgrimage. John McManus said it today, how it is just for Americans going to Normandy and staying on Omaha Beach is just absolutely part of understanding who they are, who their ancestors were, what about the future. It's an important pilgrimage. But I personally, having done it for 20 years, just don't feel challenged by telling those stories anymore. I don't feel challenged by standing at Point du Hoc, or maybe even places like Pegasus Bridge. I prefer to get inland. I did 4 tours in a row in April, May about Operation Cobra, and I loved it. I loved going down and talking about that kind of thing. Montpinçon, where the British 43rd Wessex Division were, guards armored in those kind of places. That's what floats my boat. So that's a good thing. Yeah, what other questions there? You bring such interesting people and they bring such new information to us. And that's a very good point. Thank you very much, Antoinette, because, and if you notice, there are some shows in the course of the history that in some ways are contradictory, in that you can have 2 experts on 6 months apart talking about the same event, but they will have different perspectives on it. That's one of the things about the El Alamein fortnight we did, is that not every historian agreed about every aspect of it. People are still coming out those 2 weeks debating whether Rommel was good at understanding logistics or bad at understanding logistics. And there are historians who say each version of that. And I think that's, for me, and Paul Reed is watching, who's a long time historian and tour guide, is you can never read enough books about the same event. You can never hear enough other presentations. I'm sure Paul, who trains up lots of tour guides, when he goes back and then hears people he's trained, they will have added a bit to a story and thought, oh, that's a really cool bit to add. That's a different point of view I've never thought of. That's one of the really cool things about it, is that there's constant reevaluation, reanalysis of the same events. And so you could have 6, that would be an interesting week, wouldn't it? Is have 5 historians on and have them each present on exactly the same battle, something very, very famous, like Pegasus Bridge, for example, and see whether they all line up, see whether they all tally up in the details. In terms of Pegasus Bridge, for example, there's still a debate about which order the 3 gliders landed at, because there are monuments that go 1, 2, 3. And some people say the monuments are first glider, third glider, second glider. The third glider hopped over the second one and popped into the spot. I've had this discussion with Neil Barber. I've had it with other people there. I'm still not 100% certain whether it's 1, 3, 2 or 1, 2, 3. And it's good we don't have those absolute definitive answers. I got an email the other day about the guns at Brecor Manor, where Easy Company on D-Day, Dick Winters and Joe Toy and Bill Garnier knocked out those guns. I have changed my mind about whether those guns were in an L shape or a line about 27 times over the last 10 years. I still am not 100% convinced of either suggestion. I'm much more leaning towards the L shape now, whereas for years I was more leaning to the straight line. But that is the fascinating thing, is some of these things will never ever be fully resolved, which is cool. What would I like to do with the channel that I don't have the time, money, or technology to do? That it's the promotion work, just the getting it out to a wider people. That's the time. I spend my time communicating with the guests. That's fine. I like doing the preparation work. That's fine. Making the graphics, getting the shows. This, and what I don't spend enough time doing is the promotion and the social media, social manager side of things that the big successful channels have people doing on that. That's where I don't. Yes, Matt, we had a conversation via Twitter about wearing hats, because Matt says he struggles to look good in a hat. And I have this feeling that wearing a hat and looking good in a hat is like it's either something you can or you can't do. It's like singing, or like the ability to, I don't know, I can't do that whistle. I can't do that. You either can or you can't. I can't do the loud whistle, but I can wear a hat. I think there are certain things, certain weird skills in life that you just either have or you don't. And I feel hats work for me. And there are people who put hats on and I think, no, it's not working for you. But conversely, I look shit in a suit. If I wear a suit and I'm not wearing my hat, people assume I'm security. They assume because I've got a shaved head, I'm the bouncer. I'm the night. So if I was to go to Paris and stand outside the opera house in a really expensive dinner jacket and stood there, people would absolutely assume that I'm there security. They would never assume I'm there to see an opera or go to a ballet. It's just the look I have. So when I look like I wear a suit, I rarely wear a suit. In fact, I don't even own a suit. It looks like I'm either going to court to defend myself or I'm a bouncer at the nightclub. That's where I look like in a suit. So there we go. Yeah, and again, Rob, if you have numerical superiority, surely the broad front is the best approach. We're back to the broad front. So yeah, we're getting questions about Rommel from Platypus 63, who is one of my really knowledgeable commentators on things, and I have to say I don't know the answer to lots of things you ask. You have an incredible amount of knowledge. My knowledge is a broad front. I know a little about a lot, but I don't know a lot about a little. So I couldn't answer that question for you. Yeah. Yes, the broad front worked. Could it have been better? Maybe it could have been better. But if something worked, it's like if you win a football game 2-0 and you say, well, if we'd played this to 11, maybe we'd have won 7-0. Yeah, but you did win 2-0. So speculating on the fact you might have won better. If you've won, you've won. Isn't it binary? If you defeat Germany, I suppose you're getting into the thing that if we defeated Hitler earlier, we could have saved more people from the Holocaust. But then that would have had to have been really early, because the big year for the big year for the deaths was early in the war, wasn't it? Well, actually, they escalated things in 45 again. But even after June the 6th, even if it got to Berlin in 3 months, because Berlin doesn't, the camps are in Poland, the Russians are getting there anyway, or the Soviets are getting there anyway. So I don't, yeah, the broad front worked. So it worked. This is, we all have our opinions about various World War II leadership figures. I'd be interested in your largest change in perception regarding one of the major figures of the war in the last year or two. Nothing has swung me permanently. What happened is I swing back and forth, and then sometime later the needle gets back in the right place. So when Kevin Hemel comes on and we talk about General Patton, and although he doesn't like everything Patton does, I start to understand what Patton's strengths were, and I start to come around to thinking, you know what, Patton was quite good at what he did. And then, for example, we did the Task Force Baum show back in, well, it was quite the beginning of this year, which was just ridiculous. It swung me right back into what the hell, this guy's an idiot. And then my needle will get back in again. So Freiburg, for example, has come up recently, the New Zealand commander. So Crete didn't do so well. North Africa did quite well. So depending on what I'm reading about, my opinion can swing back and forth. And I think if I want to give people some advice, is don't let any of your opinions become too deeply rooted. Don't question yourself all the time. You know, so if like the show I did with the Australian journalist Paul Ham about the atomic bombs, where he does not believe from his book that they ended the war, that the war would have ended anyway. Now, you can disagree with that, and I mostly disagree with that, but I really like his book challenging what I thought I knew. And then if I come out of it and my brain has I've challenged myself and I've passed my own test, then that's good. But there are too many people out there who have these entrenched views about Rommel or Patton or the British Army or the P-40 fighter or the Sherman tank, whatever it would be, that just will not take on any new information. They have just, no, I know this. And this is where I hate people who get very in the comments. No, this is wrong. This is what he got this wrong. And they are absolutely stuck in their thinking. And you've got to just open yourself up to new analysis. There are people out there like Michael Ackerman, who we mentioned, who is doing work into Omaha Beach that is changing what we knew. Now, there are some people, if Mike came to Normandy, right, next week, and he will get here eventually, and I were to say to all the Normandy guides, there's a guy coming over from America who's going to do a presentation to the Normandy guides about the bunkers in Omaha Beach. Some of the guys just would go, I don't need to know that. I know all that. And some would go and listen to the lecture. And I'd always be in the group that would attend the lecture, because no matter how much I think I know, I'd always go, yeah, but he's bound to know something I didn't know. But there are lots of people who feel they know everything, who just don't want to accept new stuff. Which brings us to the myth-busting episodes. And yeah, I will do some more of the Normandy myth-busting episodes. Again, it's just fitting them in and how much time everything takes. And no, my books aren't insured, but I do need to consider getting that done, because I was totting up in my head just how much some of them are probably worth. And yeah, I need to get them done. Can you make an episode together with Tino Struckman of YouTube channel Lost Battlefield Tourist? Yeah, I know him, and I think we did communicate about a year and a half ago. Collaborations always between channels, it's all a good idea, but then how do you come together and how do you work together, and on whose channel do you do the content? And is it I kind of end up doing stuff on my own. Did I have a guest on who disappointed you? I've had a couple that I didn't think were quite as good as I thought they were going to be. And obviously no names, no pack drill. And I had a few who I thought would be okay, but were really good, in that sometimes you get a book and the book reads really a bit dry and the person is really lively. And that's happened a couple of times. And I think, oh, that's a pity. But yeah, but really, it's been like twice. I have 630 shows, and I've never hated a show. I've never had one that was an absolute unmitigated disaster. It's just, just a bit, yeah, that could have. And sometimes it's myself. Sometimes I feel I haven't. I look at the early ones now. I don't look at them because I can't stand looking at the early ones. I didn't have the skill set. I still am improving, but I think I'm much better now than I was when I started. So I look at some of the early stuff and I go, Paul, you didn't ask the right questions. You didn't make that guest feel comfortable. You should bring him back or her back and do it again. So yeah. Yeah, I've had a couple of guests who didn't. With all the planning for D-Day, how did they miss the impact of the Bacars and the train needed? Well, yeah. Well, okay. Let's address this. First thing is the Allies were fully aware of the hedgerows. The Allies had entire geographical surveys. They knew where the soil changed pH. They knew where it was clay, where it was rock. They knew the water courses. They had a full understanding of the Normandy hedgerows. They all diagrams and schematics were sent. They passed across Eisenhower's desk. So whenever someone comes to them, of course the Allies didn't know about the hedgerows. They did know about the hedgerows. Now, my interpretation of this is that the hedgerows, the bocage country in Normandy is pretty unique to Normandy. Yes, there are some hedgerows in Ireland which are similar. Yes, there are some hedgerows in the southwest of England which are similar, but they're not the same as the Normandy one. This is you're talking to a guy who did a video about Normandy hedgerows. So 1.5 million Allied soldiers were eventually going to have to fight their way through Normandy. So let's say we want to train everybody up with new techniques to deal with the hedgerows. The process of sending out instructors to all the hundreds of camps across the UK and having someone explain, and not just hedgerows, by the way, the wheat fields for the British and Canadian troops. It's not just the bocage, the Normandy countryside, because the fundamental reason why June the 6th was a success is that the Allies had complete tactical surprise on the morning of June the 6th. Radar had been eliminated, more or less. And so the Germans don't know when and where we're going to land. Now, if we spend, how long would it take? How long would it take to brief those 1.5 million men on how to deal with the Normandy bocage? And then they all now know that's what they've got to deal with. Well, it doesn't take very long then for troops sitting in camps to go to libraries, start looking in books, and start finding out, oh, which place has got hedgerows? France has got hedgerows. Oh, it must be Normandy. It must. And if there were German agents in Britain who we hadn't converted to work for us, and one German agent, okay, this is kind of conspiracy theory stuff, but there might have been agents working in Britain, or the Germans might have detected it some other means. If they find out that 1.5 million men have been trained in anti-bocage techniques, there's a chance the Germans find out. So that's my big reason why they weren't prepared. Now, that doesn't fully explain, like the hedgerow cutters for vehicles, in that if they had put the tank heads together and said, look, we're going to have to, they don't have to have very many of them. Let's have, they bring a panel of 10 tank experts. They bring a couple of guys in from, 1st Armored Division here, 7th Armored Division here, 14 different campaigns around the world, and say, look, we know we're going to have to deal with these hedgerows in Normandy. What could we do for our tanks? And supposing in March 44, they come up with what became the Rhino hedgerow cutter, but developed in Normandy. They could have built those things in secret, like they built the Mulberry Harbours in secret, and they could have suddenly arranged to have all those equipped, all the Allied tanks, so that you're in the 5 and 4 file yeomanry, whatever it would be, that, on June the 2nd, you suddenly arrive your hedgerow cutter for the front of your tank, and you get told about it at the last minute. So they could have some tech, because tech can't tell secrets, can it? If they had made 2,000 Rhino hedgerow cutters and sat them in a depot in England, technology doesn't go to the pub and get drunk and tell people secrets. The technology is quiet. So they could have made up with some technology for Normandy. But I think telling people about it, that you're running the risk of the word getting out. That's my interpretation. You can think I'm wrong if you want. Are there any German historians you'd like to have on your shows? Yeah, I've only ever had 2 German historians. I'm just finding it difficult to make connections with German historians. I've sent emails and haven't had replies. I think it seems to be that Germans don't always have, like American historians tend to have websites, they have Twitter accounts. German historians, maybe because they're working in German language, social media is primarily English language, they don't seem to have a presence on the internet. I'm struggling to find German historians. And then when you do make contact with German historians, one of the things about German historians, understandably, is they have a bit of sensitivity about how they are going to be interpreted by a History Channel. Are they going to, because if you're German talking about World War II, it's, the SS, Nazis, atrocities, they're once bitten, twice shy, German historians. They don't want to be in a situation where they are made to say something they don't want to say. It's people like Paul Reed, Matt Bone, others are watching. If you're talking about the British and Americans, you can just go anywhere and say anything. No one's going to judge you. If you're a British guy in your 50s and you're really, really interested in, let's say, the 5 and 4 file yeomanry, like Peter Hart is, or the East Riding yeomanry, like Ben Main is, you can proudly say to your friends, yeah, I'm interested in World War II, and I really like the East Riding yeomanry. They're a tank unit. If you're a German historian and you say, yeah, I'm interested in World War II, and I really like a tank battalion that had Tigers on the Eastern Front, just saying that, people start thinking, well, yeah, you must be a Nazi then. If you're interested in the German, you must be. Do you think Hitler's cool? It's that whole thing about the fascination with Third World. So German historians have to come at this whole subject with a whole lot of baggage that I don't have. So that is why I don't have many German historians. I'd love to have more German historians on, and of course, having Russian historians on is going to be very difficult for the next 20, 30 years. I was talking with John Manis today, the people he knows writing about the Eastern Front. They say now it's worse access to Russian archives that it was at the height of the Cold War in the 1950s and 60s. So don't be thinking that the people we love, like David Stahl and Prit Buttar, are going to be able to investigate the Eastern Front and get new information from Russia in the next few years. It's not going to happen. So yes, we could have an entire show of John and Zeta disagreeing about Monty, and it's not, and they agreed on some things and disagreed on others, and that's fascinating, isn't it? They did. No, they absolutely looked at the bocage. If I've got the whole bound volumes of the Neptune plans. I can promise you that they had schematics and line drawings done of the hedgerows. They knew exactly the cultural studies done. They knew that I promise you, the bocage was completely understood by Allied intelligence. I promise you. There was no doubt what they were going to find. It's just that information hadn't been shared with everybody who needed it. As in most wars about most things. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Generally, security. You don't tell everybody about everything they need to know. It's on a need-to-know basis. You can't possibly brief everybody in every army about every aspect of the battlefield. That's what commanders do. Commanders make those decisions. So, another show about with the worst war movies. That'd be cool, wouldn't it? Should do that. Do I have a view on why Sword Beach had 4 sectors that the majority come through Queen's? I don't. And I still don't understand how they worked out the widths of those sectors. So Omaha Beach, for example, which goes dog green, dog white, dog red, easy red, easy green, or easy green, easy red, fox red, fox green, fox red. Why didn't Fox have a white? Why is there not an easy white? Why is there a dog white? But why is easy red really wide, but dog white really narrow? I've spoken to lots of people about how they made those separations. Is it based on the number of German defenders in that section? Is it based on the Widerstand? Is it based on the number of people landing? I've never come up with an understanding of why they separated those sectors to the sizes they were. Why are the exits on Utah Beach 1, 2, 3, 4, and the exits on Omaha D1, D3, E1, E3, F1? Why could they not number them 1 to 5? Why not have the same system for numbering the ways off a landing sector across the 5 beaches? I don't have answers to some of those questions. You know what? I kind of like the fact we don't have answers to some of those questions. It means there are things that you don't know. You just don't. Well, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Why didn't we do that? Well, that's just, yeah. But Sword had, more different numbers of sectors. I mean, obviously, the other thing that's confusing is, of course, it doesn't go alphabetically from west to east, because Utah was added later. So Utah is Sugar, Tear, and Uncle, STU. Then it goes to Omaha, so it goes back to CDE. And Sword is QR. And Juno is M, and Gold is K, and it doesn't go alphabetically from west to east or east to west. It did. Yeah, exactly, Rob. It went the numbering, but then Utah changed it. But why number the sectors differently? It's just, there's lots of things that I don't. The question about, it's a green screen. I have a green screen. If I do this, you see my room behind appears, but it's such messy, that one. That's the green screen. I don't ever do that. It's behind the scenes, the DVD extras. So while I'm gonna do some here's a good question before I answer. Why did the Americans fail so badly in the pre-bombardment of Omaha, given their experience at Tarawa? The best advice for you is to read Stephen Bork's new book, the Osprey Air Power series. It's like an 80-90 page Osprey book. Professor Bork has done more work than anybody else alive to understand the whole 8th Air Force plan. And basically, the 8th Air Force knew it wasn't going to work and had been told to do it, and it wasn't their plan. And it's all in the book. It's all in the book about people advising this, the ways of doing it. And they were so close to having, in advance of it, the right plan, but for reasons they didn't adopt the right plan. But I bought the book when it first came out a couple of months ago, and it's just really good. And Paul Reed, if you haven't got it yet, as a Normandy guide, usually, because you have these lovely graphics where it tells you which squadron, which bomb group flew over which sector at what time, dropping which ordnance and who did it. It's just so good. So yeah, they should have done the bombing correctly. They were so close to doing it, but just didn't get it right. And it's because everybody's got to say. I mean, it came in to this discussion about what were we talking about a couple of days ago? Tactical air power. And I went to a lecture by Michael Nyberg a couple of nights ago. He's talking about the fact that the transportation plan, so in, pre D-Day, so back in March and April, and Matt Bone came on talking about the typhoons. The transportation plan and knocking out all those bridges over the Loire and the bridges over the Seine, and why bother? A lot of people's accepted understanding of that now is it was basically a waste of time, and boiling it down is Tedder and Collishaw and all those guys in North Africa had worked out that the air power should not be doing what the army said they wanted from air power. Air power should do what they understood being the right thing to do. So the army wanted to kind of an umbrella carpet protection overhead, and the Air Force were told to do that originally in Western Desert. And they said, no, we've got to be doing interdiction and doing stuff and hitting the rear. And basically for Normandy, it was the system, the knocking out, the transportation plan was to try and hit everything, hit all the bridges over the Loire, all the bridges over the Seine, all the towns where crossroads are. And at the expense of 35,000 French died in 1944 under Allied bombs, something like that. So huge amounts of French were killed. But the better way to do it, maybe, and I think this is what I would think, is don't look out the radar. That needs to be done. But when it comes to the trying to prevent the Germans counterattack into Normandy, is rather than trying to get every single bridge in advance of D-Day from Belgium to Spain, which is kind of what they did, is specifically target the bridges ahead of the units that are moving. We have Ultra. So if we know that, for example, 2nd SS Das Reich are coming from this part, they're going to have to come through this town, this town, this town. In the hours before that, with maybe 9th Air Force or 2nd Tactical Air Force, hit those bridges with low-level bombers as the Germans are coming towards them. Because if you knock out a bridge too early, the Germans just rebuild it anyway. And that's part of the problem with April, the transportation plan, is the bridges they did knock out, the Germans then replaced them or rebuilt them or went a different way. So Normandy they reverse. So that kind of answers Gary's question. I think it was Gary with it, Dermot, about things that went wrong in Normandy, is that some of the D-Day planning in terms of use of air power was old school of things they'd already thrown out after North Africa and Sicily. So yeah, it's but hey, again, D-Day worked, so let's not question it too much, really. What are my opinions from people from former countries occupied reenacting the SS? I think reenacting the SS is problematic, full stop. I have no problem generally with people reenacting the Axis, and I think in the right environment, having an enemy at an event is right for balance, but I don't think there ever really needs to be SS. I don't think, if you want to reenact the Germans, choose another unit. I think you immediately open yourself up to lots of questions that are hard to answer if you dress as SS, whether you're in Britain, America, anywhere. I just don't like the idea of wearing SS. And I have friends who used to do SS reenactment and things like that. And yeah. Catherine Merridale on the Red Armies, one of the people I tried to contact. If you know her, Phil, because I think I sent her an email and didn't get a reply. If you happen to know her and could put a word in for me, that would be really good. We can speak about that next week. She'd be really good as a guest. I agree. Are there any taboo subjects about World War II? I think there's much taboo now. I mean, we on World War II TV and other people, we've addressed like the fact of the capital murders. I mean, there are the people on the Brookwood Memorial in Britain who were murdered. We did the show with oh God, who was that with? My brain is terrible. About the people who have been committed crimes in the British forces who are listed on the same memorial as people who died, in bomber command. So we talk about that now. We talk about the fact. We talk about Holocaust by bullets now. That's accepted now. We talk about the rapes. We talk about the treatment of women in World War II. There's very little left, I think, that hasn't been tackled. The interesting is some people aren't listening. Is it doesn't matter how many things there are on YouTube about how fucking awful the SS are and how shit the Germans were and how shit, there are still people out there who don't want to believe that people that they worship, some of these tank aces, and I'm not using the word worship lightly. There are some weird people out there who get their kicks celebrating people like Kurt Meyer and Michael Wittmann and these guys, and they just are blinkered to the fact that these guys represented an incredibly evil regime, and in some cases were personally involved in all sorts of atrocities. Phil Blood is the master of talking about. If you were a senior officer in any branch of the Third Reich, you're kind of complicit. There's very few people of any kind of rank who are not somehow part of that mechanism. So, yeah, wearing SS is just I didn't used to think that way, but as I've got older, I just think it's a bit dodgy now. So, yeah, that's the SS. I'll just do a couple more books while I put some more questions up. So, if you are enjoying SAS Rogue Heroes or not enjoying SAS Rogue Heroes or are waiting to see it and then you'll decide whether it's good or bad, another book worth reading is Gavin Mortimer's book, First SAS. Gavin, like Damien Lewis, writes with the full backing of the SAS associations, and it's really, really good read. And another, while we're doing good books, I've got a few beside me now. This book, by Dr. Philip Blood, who's watching Hitler's Bandit Hunters, which I'm going to take to Germany next week and have him because it's missing something just there. You see that space? That's where Phil's signature will be. Hopefully, if I get it before he goes to the pub at the end of next week. Talking about reevaluating the war. If you haven't read this book yet, read this. Looking for the Good War, Elizabeth D. Samet. Who I'm hoping to have as a guest sometime. It's all about how America looks at World War II, and it goes through the era of the 1980s and the sort of almost a celebration of World War II, the Saving Private Ryan 90s, the Greatest Generation. It's really, she knows about war films, how it's wartime literature, James Jones, people like that. Really, it's not a massive book. I think I did it in like 2 or 3 nights. So Elizabeth Samet, Looking for the Good War, American Amnesia and the Violent Pursuit of Happiness. And if you think, it's some liberal trying to do it, she teaches at West Point, Elizabeth Samet. So she's done the walk, walk the talk, talk the talk. She knows what she's talking about. So a really good book to watch. Let's do a couple more questions. Love the British words like dodgy. Yeah, dodgy is a good word, isn't it? It's dodgy. And on one last book, we're doing a Hurtgen Forest week in December. There's lots of big overviews. Edward Miller's book on Hurtgen is really good. This is one I enjoyed, and this chap, Chris Hartley will be on as a guest. The Lost Soldier. It's about a particular soldier in the 28th Division. And the research into him, that's worth getting there. I'll have a sip of water because I'm getting a bit hoarse. So I'm probably there were lots of questions earlier on that I didn't answer, but book signing in a pub. Do I have a show featuring Popsky's Private Army? No, not yet. And no, I have not as yet found anybody to talk about that. I have made connection with Brendan O'Carroll, not the guy who plays in that awful comedy Mrs. Brown, the New Zealand historian. So he's going to do a show about the LRDG next year. We will be doing more LRDG stuff in the future. We talked about Tal Visota in my Great War Films, but I think it was on my channel. It might have been on a show with Lance Nielsen, but Tal Visota is in my top 5 war films of all time. If you don't know what it is, it's the Finnish-made film about, well, as it says there on the caption, the Winter War of 1939-40. And if you do watch it, watch the extended version. There's a couple of versions out there. There's one that I think it might have been shown as a TV show in Finland originally. I think there's a 3-hour version. Watch the long one. It kind of works a bit like a Band of Brothers. You watch the 3 hours one, because you get like an hour and a half of who these people are. And then it gets into the combat, and you know, it's tanks, it's aircraft, it's trench warfare kind of thing. It's just a really, really, really good film. And don't watch the dubbed version, watch the subtitle version. The dubbed version is awful. Yes, I have tried to contact Robert and never had a response to emails. Whether I've got the wrong email or it's in spam, I've sent several, and yeah, no, not been able to make contact with him for some reason. So yeah, it'd be good. Yeah, I think I'm not going to head soon. It's been an hour and a half. I'm going to outstay my welcome. If you need just 1 or 2 more questions, give me 1 or 2 more to answer. I'll try and scroll back and find something else. I'm trying to read some questions. It's lots of, you're just chatting amongst yourselves, which is fine. Should allies have used more gliders and a few paratroopers around D-Day? That's an interesting question. I don't know. I think possibly. The difficulty would be a glider needs a tug aircraft, so you're taking an aircraft away from something else. How many gliders? I don't think there are many gliders left in the UK. I think we pretty much used all the gliders we had, and they built new ones for September. I don't think there. I think it was like landing craft. I think, you know, they used all they had. So even if they had more gliders, who would there be to go in them? We used the entire 6th Airborne Division, 101st ADC. I suppose they could have used the 1st Airborne, but the 1st Airborne has to stay in reserve for any potential landings. But I mean, it's a big debate, is it, about did the gliders work on balance better than the paratroopers? Did the paratroopers work better than the gliders? Both had really good bits and really bad bits. When gliders work well, they work really well. And I think a lot of people, when they think of gliders, they think of those real precision pinpoint Jim Walwork Pegasus Bridge glider. But Jim had a lot of chance to practice, and Jim was an incredibly gifted TIE pilot and lots of training. A lot of glider pilots had not landed one before because they were being written off in training. So yeah, more gliders. I think we were already pushing it with glider pilots and people to go in. I don't think there were enough gliders. I don't think there were enough glider pilots. I don't think there were any more troops to go in them. So I think that answers the question. Really, there wasn't, even if we could think of something to do with them, there weren't the people or the equipment anyway. What is my favorite tank? I don't know. I mean, it's the Churchill is my favorite tank. I think the Churchill achieves its quite specific remit the most efficiently. It's not an all-rounder. The Churchill does what it does well. It's a slow-moving, heavily protected infantry tank, really. The Sherman is an all-rounder. The T-34 is an all-rounder. The Panzer IV, I suppose, is an all-rounder. But I think I like the idea of an aircraft or tank that is specifically tasked with one thing that it does well. So, yeah, so I think the Churchill, for what it does, is really good. Obviously, some of the really good tanks, like the Comet for the British, Pershing, they come in too late in the war to make a difference, but those ones would have maybe been good. I want to do a show on Case White, and thank you for signing up as on the channel. Because Robert, we just thought about, wrote a book on Case White, and again, it's about finding his story. But you will like, and whether you're watching early, you'll like the 2 weeks we're devoting in the new year to the Eastern Front 42 to 43. One of the things I kind of regret now is that when I started this in 2020, I could have done a lot more stuff on the 80th anniversary of 1940. But as I said earlier, I started off by doing what I was familiar with. So I did lots of Normandy shows in the first year. And then last year, 2021, I did summer shows of 40. But this year, I've done a lot of shows about 1942, not exclusively, because the one I bought said the Hurtgen Forest, obviously, is 44, 45. But I wish now in 2020 I'd acknowledge a lot more of the 1940 events. So I could have done anniversaries of the Winter War, for example, in Finland. I could have done some stuff about the fall of France. But of course, I can tackle that all again when we get the 90th anniversary. If I'm not dead, that's not 85th anniversary. So or the 90th. So I will come round and do all those things again. And that one other thing that is, and yeah, Darren, I'm going to do 2 weeks. Well, we're going to start backwards. We're going to coincide the show with the fall of Tunis. And then as we look at the fall of Tunis, we'll go back to Torch. So we'll take the November to May period. And I've got some good guests. Michael Nyberg is going to come on and talk about the French political situation. So Vichy France and Darlan and things like that. So, and Comet did get superseded pretty quickly. Yeah. So they'll do a lot about Torch next year. But another thing, and Bagration, that probably will end up coming up in 2024. I will coincide that with the 80th anniversary, probably. Have I read Stalin's War? Sean Meakin, yes, and he was on the channel talking about it about a year ago. So look that one out. That's a good book. Will Arkan be covered as part of the Hergen? Not specifically in the week of shows about the Hergen Fork. It's an introductory week. But we will do some stuff about Arkan, and we will do some stuff with Phil Blood in the future. But one of the things, the questions and comments I get is, you guys are brilliant, and the other people who email is you're sending me ideas all the time, which is fantastic. I couldn't work without your ideas. But I can't get them all. I can't do them all immediately. I can't do them all now. I can't get every idea done now. I mean, as I told you, so let me tell you what I've got coming up so that you can have a rough idea. This is advance notice. So I'm off for a few days. I may do 2 weeks on the Sino-Japanese War. That takes us to the end of December. Then in December, there's a week of shows about, it's tentatively about women in World War II. So Alexandra Ritchie is talking about the female resistance fighters in Poland and the Warsaw Uprising. Teresa Kaminsky is talking about female resistance in the Philippines. Megan Corman is talking about the escape lines in the Netherlands. Julia Jones is talking about a Royal Naval person. There's someone else I'm working on. So it's kind of resistance. But then it's the Hergen week. Then over Christmas, kind of random shows. We're going to do one on the anniversary of Wake Island. That's the 82nd anniversary. We've got a show about diving for wrecks off Saipan. That'll be really good. Andy Chatterton's coming on talking about the Churchill's auxiliary units. Krista, who was postponed from the Arnhem week, is coming back on to talk about Arnhem. Then we've got the 2 weeks about the anniversary of the Eastern Front, so the winter of 42, 43. Then there's a Balkans week I'm planning, then a Pacific Ground War week, and then a Canadian week starting end of January. Then after the Canadian week, another 8th Air Force week. Then a week about veterans, suicides, PTSD, oral history, blah, blah, blah. Then a first Tank Destroyers week. Then we start the Tunisian campaign Torch week. And then the next month is going to be going back to the desert again, looking at special forces. That's taking me up till the end of March. So I'm already knowing what I'm doing kind of to the end of March. So so Eastern Front, Balkans, ground war. But people will say, "Oh, you're not doing anything about this. You're not doing anything about." Give me time. I'll get to eventually. I'll get to everything eventually. If I live long enough, I will get to everything eventually. When do I sleep? One of the funny things is like when I did the show with Damien Lewis and Mag was away in Cherbourg that night. I was on my own in the house. I was buzzing after that show because when I do have a really good show, I it's like coming off stage a bit. I'm not comparing myself to Paul McCartney or Bruce Springsteen, but there is a bit of that. So I didn't get. I was like still in bed, like wide awake at 3 a.m. or something. I just couldn't sleep. So it's. And if I have a show that I didn't think went very well, if I have a show that didn't go very well, it's normally myself I question. It's normally I think I didn't do enough. I didn't ask the right questions, or I didn't handle it or something. Then I agonize about that. So other nights I just sleep like a log. But yeah, sometimes I just can't sleep. So episode on the Belgian and Piron Brigade would be really good. Weather forecasting would be really good. So don't forget, folks. Here's another point I'll say is I do all this on my own. Mag helps by feeding me a lot, keeping me sane, and we go and do stuff. But Mag's a full-time tour guide now, and Mag's a mum to 2 kids and stuff. So I do this all on my own. So when people say, oh, you could do this, you could do that, why aren't you doing this? I'm working a lot of this, and I will get to all these subjects eventually. And it's like, people say, you're doing too much on the Pacific. Then, oh, but you're not doing enough on the Eastern Front. You're doing too much on the. Of course, if there's whoever those of you watching, there'll be certain weeks you like more than other weeks. I'm trying to please everybody. I'm trying to cover everything. I mean, the Sino-Japanese war will be really interesting, but some people won't be interested in that. It's why I don't really do much about the tech and the aircraft and the tanks, particularly because there are other people doing that. But yeah, we'll eventually get to everything at some point if I live long enough. That's the thing. So thank you, Lorelei. I like to think it's a good channel, and we are doing what we're doing. Yes, I do want to create a broadside for my cough, Neil. If you're coming over to Norway, bring me a case of beer. I might get to London for a weekend in December to meet up with the History Hack team for a weekend maybe, but won't be able to bring stuff back because I'll be going a Eurostar. So yeah. Any other good questions to finish off? Nothing that I want to answer. I mean, I'm tired now. Voice is going. But yeah, so just to finish off, not that I'm putting the begging cap out again, but I've said it before. This takes an extraordinary amount of time. And if I went back into full-time guiding next year, which I'm not going to, or have no plans to, I could earn more money for less hours than what I'm doing now. And I will never change my method and my ideology, if that's the right word, of putting everything free on YouTube. I will never hide any of my content behind paywalls or, have best stuff for patrons. Never will you see me like Damien Lewis, and you would be a star. I would never when I say, well, to watch me and Damien talk, you've got to pay. That's only for patrons. Everything I do will always be on YouTube, free for everybody at the same time, right? Policy. But a few more people giving a couple of dollars a month via either YouTube or Patreon would just take a little bit more of the financial weight of responsibility off my shoulders and allow me to go into next year really, really confident that this can be my main thing, because I really, really, really like doing it. Okay. And yes, everything's building, and thank you to my patrons for supporting me. Thank you to the YouTube channel. But every month you get to the point at the end of the month when I go to get my patron payment, and you look at the people who've joined, but then people have fallen away. They've cancelled. That happens. It's that they don't want to watch you anymore, or their credit cards run out and they don't get the email. So every month you gain a few, but you lose a few. So this month on YouTube, I lost more members than I gained. So people who had started giving me money and then stopped, which is fine. And if people want to stop doing it, and I understand we're looking at a winter, and there's fuel bills are going up and people are worried about things, but it does kind of make me think, if you used to be able to afford £2 a month, but now you can't afford £2 a month, what? It's not like I'm asking for 25 quid from people. Some people do pay $25 a month. Thank you for those people who pay. And I know it's hard. You're right, Andres. It's a hard time, but it's the old thing. If 500 people gave me $2, 500 extra people gave me $2 a month, they would hardly notice that $2, but I would notice the benefit of that, and it would just mean I could I want to decorate this room, so I don't have to have green. I want to make a studio. That's going to need money. So yeah, if you would consider becoming a YouTube channel member or a patron, it would be very, very appreciated. And I think some people think that he's in Normandy, he gets to meet these tour guides, he's probably really well off, he's got lots of books. Sure, I kind of have, but this costs a lot of money as well. Time. Great Dominion saying, should I do my Churchill impression? I say, I've got to be in the right mood to a Churchill impression, and I've got to have to think about what I'm going to say. But never in the field. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. I'll have to think about that. I can't, in the pub, in the right environment, I can do a Churchill, I think, a reasonable Churchill. But then that's drunk me. Drunk me thinks I can do Michael Caine. Drunk me thinks I can do other things. But I think everybody, Brit, thinks they can do a Churchill. It doesn't matter to me either Patreon or YouTube membership. Some people do both, in fact. Either way, it doesn't make any difference. So the charges and costs and things are about the same. I get a payment each month from YouTube, and I get a payment each month from Patreon. So either way, it would just, there are some channels out there earning tens of thousands a month. I would love to get that. I'm in hundreds of dollars a month. But this is my full-time job now, folks. And as a tour guide, as I said, I promise you, I'm not lying. I could make more money going back to being a full-time tour guide. Just could. But I love this. You probably can tell I love this. So not putting a begging cab out, but if you've been watching a lot of channel shows and you're enjoying what we're doing, you may not think you're making a difference, but if you are making it, that $2 a month you give me, if you sign up, really helps me sleep at night and makes me know that what I'm doing, all this work, is worth doing in the future, because I ain't getting any younger. So there we are. I'm gonna leave it at that, because I'm gonna get a cough in a minute. A little bit from us will go a long way. That's absolutely right, Lorelei. And I will do, for those who are patrons, I will do a Zoom conversation, a Christmas one. We'll do one where those of you who are patrons, we'll do a big Zoom chat where we'll all just have a little chat and stuff, and do that. So there we are. I'm gonna leave it at that. So I'm gonna be off a few days and then come back, and we'll leap into the Sino-Japanese War and Hurtgen Forest, and don't think just because I'm not live streaming I'm not working. I've still got to do the emails, still got to do the prep, and still got to plan everything else. So some really exciting weeks coming up. And I was saying to John today, John McManus again, I was saying, if you had told me when I did that first clunky 15-hour June the 6th live stream 2.5 years ago that there'd be a point where I'm 640 shows in, having done shows with historians that have been my heroes, people, I had no idea I'd get. I knew some historians, but I had no idea. I mean, in fact, Richard Frank is going to be on talking about the Sino-Japanese War. Richard Frank's book on Guadalcanal is probably the best ever done, and he's going to be on my channel. Rana Mitter, hopefully, will be on my channel. Jason D. Marks with Stalingrad writing. I can't believe these historians are now willing to come on this. So there we are. I'm going to stop it there. I will see you all after my sojourn in Germany, and I will have a drink with Dr. Phil Blood and Niels. I think he's going to maybe make his way and meet us over there, and that'd be good. So be good. So thanks, everybody. This is Paul Woodadge for WW2TV. So don't forget to hit that like, leave a comment, and if you consider becoming a patron, I will be very grateful. Cheers, everybody. I will have a nice week, and I will see you later on the other side. Bye.